Now, don't quote me on this, but I think CinemaSins are trying desperately to be the guys from Mystery Science Theater with their clickbait bullshit. Yeah, it doesn't work, as they get everything about this movie wrong.
Reading.
No joke. Literally the first sin in this video is reading, because actually paying attention to the events that take place in the movies is overrated. Hey, CinemaSins, maybe if you read the opening title scroll, you would actually know what was happening in the movie. And that first sin is kind of a bad taste of what we're going to expect. Strap in and hold on, as the next 21 minutes are going to be filled with mediocre at best jokes, an inability to pay attention, and a misunderstanding not just of the Last Jedi's plot, but of the Star Wars universe as a whole. This is going to be a long one.
Work your magic!
BB-8's magic quickly devolves into an electric version of the boy plugging the wall from that one ancient fable I've forgotten the name of.
Keep in mind, BB-8 is putting himself through intense pain for the sake of his friends and allies in the Resistance. If he doesn't do that, they will all end up dead. This is less a sin and more a microcosm of the Last Jedi's plot in a nutshell, regarding the sacrifices the Resistance is making in order to defeat the First Order.
Bring the bombs! Resistance bombers approaching.
But why? Is every member of this rebel fleet a Poe Dameron ignoring General Leia's orders? This battle sure does go to awfully fast. Like, so fast they should never even have attempted it. I mean, it ultimately ends with one bomber left to drop bombs. They knew there would be fighters. They acted earlier like Poe taking out the cannons would make this easy. Instead, it's more lopsided than Super Bowl 24.
While I agree that Poe's plan was reckless, what does CinemaSins expect the Resistance fleet to do? Get wiped out by the First Order? The bombers are providing cover for the rest of the fleet, so they can prepare to make the jump to hyperspace, which was their job. Also, it's kind of funny how CinemaSins is complaining about how outmatched the Resistance is, when earlier in this video, they made this comment.
These guys barely hit anybody when they have all the cannons.
So, this was a terrible plan because the Resistance bombers are getting wiped out, but also, the First Order cannons can't hit anything. Based on your logic, CinemaSins, how can the First Order outmatch the Resistance if, like you said, they can barely hit the broadside of a barn? These pieces don't go together.
As we see this once proud dreadnought explode in a cascade of flames, I'm wondering, why are all the other First Order ships useless here? They could fly after the rebel fleet too, right? Why did they put all their eggs in the dread basket?
The First Order, the guys who built Starkiller Base, think that a single locus of power will bring them victory? The literal fascists are too enamored with using exceptionally large wonder weapons and are stunned when those weapons of mass destruction are destroyed? I never would have guessed.
They can't get away, Supreme Leader. We have them tied on the end of a string.
Why wouldn't Snoke know that already, though?
I love how CinemaSins automatically assumes Snoke already knows this. No, Hux telling Snoke this is the exact reason why Snoke called in the first place. And even if Snoke already knew this, and is just being an asshole to Hux for the sake of being an asshole, why are you acting shocked at the idea of the guy who chose the title of Supreme Leader being a bully?
Go away!
Look, if you want Luke to be disillusioned and turned away from the Force, fine. But Rey just told him his goddamn sister center, and they need his help. He's not even gonna ask about the details? Just, hey man, I have angst over here.
The reason why Luke refuses to go and help is explained in the movie later in flashback. Luke gets a vision of Kylo falling to the dark side, and has a brief thought of possibly killing him to prevent Kylo from killing countless more people, including children. Luke can't go through with it, but it's too late. Kylo attacks Luke, takes a bunch of students to form the Knights of Ren, while killing the rest of Luke's new Jedi Order, leaving Luke to live with his failure, a constant theme throughout most of The Last Jedi's runtime.
Leia sent me here with hope.
But not Empire or Jedi? Jeez. Just imagine going on a trip with only A New Hope and Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium.
Was that your attempt at a joke? Because if so, I recommend going back to the drawing board and starting over.
Can we jump to light speed?
We have enough fuel resources for just one jump.
Fuel? Is this the first mention of the concept of fuel in Star Wars? I sure don't remember Han in the original trilogy ever having to worry about fuel. Certainly not for jumps to light speed. And Rey just took the Falcon supposedly halfway around the universe looking for Luke. But this ship only has enough fuel for one more jump? Jesus.
Actually, this wasn't the first time fuel has been mentioned in a Star Wars movie. Hell, the reason why they went to Tatooine in The Phantom Menace was so they can refuel their ship. There's even an article about fuel to be found on Wikipedia with references and all. Though, in fairness, the fact about fuel I just presented makes this sin later in the same video.
God damn it, I pinpointed the moment I gave up on modern Star Wars movies, and it was the fuel. It was the f***ing fuel.
Kind of hilarious in hindsight, just not in the way CinemaSins intended.
Because Snoke's ship and evil fleet all come out of hyperspace here instead of over there, this entire movie is allowed to take place. Ships in this universe only have 2 speeds, faster than f***ing light and impulse power.
It's been established since the original Star Wars that there would be risks at traveling through hyperspace without the precise calculations. For all the First Order knew, if they jumped to hyperspace past the Resistance fleet, they could have flew right through a star or bounced too close to a supernova. So, the First Order can't easily jump to hyperspace past the Resistance fleet without knowing the risks of what's on the other side.
It takes until The Last Jedi for these movies to actually show Leia doing something with the Force other than telepathic communication. Also, I truly don't care if you want to introduce new Force powers, but a little explanation goes a long way. Especially when said new power is literal space resurrection. Isn't she unkillable now? Where's the danger? Or does she only have enough fuel for one space resurrection?
It's not space resurrection. At no point in this scene did Leia die. You don't immediately asphyxiate in space. Leia has enough time to use telekinesis, which might I add was an established Jedi trick to pull herself to safety, especially since, according to CinemaSin's own logic, there's no gravity in space.
Captain, Commander, you can call me whatever you like. I just want to know what's going on.
Of course you do.
So begins the completely unnecessary and runtime bloating let's not tell Poe what's going on so Finn and Rose can go on a side quest that adds an extra 30 minutes to this movie plot point.
Holdo doesn't know if she can trust Poe, especially after his reckless maneuvers during the evacuation of the Resistance headquarters. Putting that aside, Pablo Hidalgo confirmed on Twitter that admirals don't need to share their plans with captains. By insisting what's going on and not trusting Holdo, Poe is acting insubordinate by completely disobeying orders from a commanding officer. As for the Finn and Rose subplot, Jane Nicholson already mentioned this in her video about The Last Jedi, but it ties into the major theme of the movie, that being the theme of failure and how each of the characters deal with it.
We destroy her and disable the tracker without them realizing.
They
and
won't
we can...
realize it's off for one system cycle. About 6 minutes.
What? What's a system cycle? So you can turn off a main bridge Class A system, but no one notices until the computer does, what, a sweep of the ship for any changes to processes? And the ship is so huge it takes 6 minutes? F***ing hell. This movie knows where it wants all its characters to be at certain times, but gives zero shits about how and why they get there.
Okay, allow me to present my counter-argument. First, early in the same video, CinemaSins complained about how schizophrenic the tech levels are.
Star Wars is weird. It's like a long time ago in a galaxy far away. But they have super advanced space travel and weapons technology, yet no one's invented the photograph.
Based on your own arguments, CinemaSins, it's not unbelievable that the computer controlling the ship only notices whether or not a specific widget is on every 6 minutes. Second, Snoke's flagship is huge. Huge enough that having a device like that on all the time would probably drain power on the ship. Third, they really don't need this tracking ship across hyperspace device until the ship makes the jump to hyperspace. So unless some pendant is looking at this device with one hand poised ready to fire, Rose's plan might be worth a shot, and we know there isn't a pendant because later in this video, you show the person whose job it is to review the shields that prevent the ship from getting destroyed, instead choosing to laugh at how unimpressed they are about occasional gaps in their shields. Lastly, the First Order has this tendency of creating systems with immense power but one massive design flaw, which, if destroyed, would cripple the First Order, considering how they're the remnants of the Galactic Empire, who George Lucas originally based on Nazi Germany.
I was cleaning my blaster, it went off.
This is exactly the excuse I would tell my ex-girlfriend whenever she caught me masturbating.
I really did not need to know that, thank you. Oh god. Just the thought of Jeremy from CinemaSins masturbating. I will never be clean again.
Fleet's only got 18 hours of fuel left. We gotta hurry.
How is there even enough fuel for your little hyperspace journey to Space Vegas?
Because there's a difference between needing to refuel one ship and needing to refuel an entire fleet of ships.
Gotta tell you, these discount horse things just took me right out of the movie.
It's kind of hard to be taken out of the movie when you weren't even paying attention to begin with.
I wish I could put my fist through this whole lousy, beautiful town.
And film it, and upload it to Pornhub.
Both Sean and Bob Vids have already established this, but CinemaSins have this tendency for cutting dialogue for the sake of a mediocre at best joke. For instance, in this scene, Rose actually has a valid reason for wanting Canto Bight destroyed, especially how she grew up in an impoverished mining colony where she was forced by the First Order to mine resources for their war effort, while the rich at Canto Bight benefited from the suffering of the poor. This is explained in the movie, yet CinemaSins ignore this, instead choosing to make a fucking sex joke.
Their medical frigate is out of fuel, and its shields are down.
Gotta ask, since we just saw Finn and Rose flying through hyperspace a minute ago in this cruiser, Can the rebels not take fuel from all the smaller ships and hook up the medical frigate with it? Or is this some Star Wars thing that only Star Wars people know, where everything uses different kinds of fuel?
CinemaSins are suggesting that the Resistance take fuel from the small ships and use it to refuel the bigger ships. While this plan sounds like it could work on paper, you must factor in the fact that the Resistance would be doing it without slowing down and while getting shot at by the First Order. It becomes a reckless plan that someone like Poe Dameron would try. A plan which, might I remind you, CinemaSins themselves called Poe dumb for leading earlier in this video.
This battle sure does go to awfully fast. Like, so fast they should never even have attempted it. I mean, it ultimately ends with one bomber left to drop bombs. They knew there would be fighters. They acted earlier like Poe taking out the cannons would make this easy. Instead, it's more lopsided than Super Bowl 24.
Remember the sin? Because I do.
Stop enjoying this! Stop enjoying this!
Oh, Finn, I am decidedly not enjoying this.
Well, we can't all be nitpicky assholes who don't even bother watching the movie in question before writing sins for it.
Heroes nearly fall off a cliff and slide right to the edge of their deaths cliché.
Just because something is cliche doesn't automatically mean it sucks. For instance, this scene reminds the audience of the tension that's taking place regarding whether or not the surviving members of the Resistance will survive their encounter with the First Order. Tension that's felt throughout The Last Jedi's entire runtime.
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
And that, my friends, was the mantra recited during the writing of this script in direct relation to the Star Wars franchise. You gotta admire the balls on this movie. I almost want to remove Sins for it being so ballsy, but you know how we do.
The one thing CinemaSins almost admitted to not sinning, and it's something they get completely wrong. This was less a mantra the writers of the script said regarding the Star Wars franchise, and more a flaw with the character. A flaw which plays a major role into the main theme of the movie. Because Kylo is so willing to let the past die, he's unable to learn from his mistakes, and continues to make them time and time again.
Let me see them. My parents. Please.
Rian Johnson's Star Wars troll. You can now roll the footage from A Few Good Men here.
One of the biggest complaints about The Last Jedi is that we're given an unsatisfactory explanation as to who Rey's parents are. A complaint CinemaSins feed into. To which I say, does it really matter where Rey came from? Who her parents are is irrelevant to who Rey is as a character. I really love that Rey came from nothing, and that she's just some random person who knows how to do the Force. It makes it clear that everyone has the ability to learn how to use the Force. Not only that, but Rey being able to learn the Force without it being in her bloodline harkens back to something Yoda said in The Empire Strikes Back about how the Force's energy surrounds us and binds the universe together. But speaking of Yoda...
Also, Yoda looks like an actor who actually died in real life and then they found archive footage to put him into this movie.
They want to make Yoda look as close to the original puppet from The Empire Strikes Back as humanly possible, and not look how he did in the prequels. Yoda's original design in The Empire Strikes Back was based on Albert Einstein. It must take considerable time and effort to be this consistently wrong, but CinemaSins have mastered it to a T.
But that library contained nothing that the girl Rey does not already possess.
Grammatically, this is a clever way of disguising whether or not the library itself and the text therein were ever actually important.
Or maybe Rey already took the books with her before Yoda destroyed the library. How do I know this? Because later in the movie, we see the books that were in the library on the Millennium Falcon. Like I said, an inability to pay attention.
Tell us that we have a plan. That there's hope.
I swear to fuzzy Zeus on a cracker, if one more person says hope, I'm going to lose my Star Wars movies are hereby forbidden from ever again using the word hope. If you cast soccer player Hope Solo in a movie, you better change her name in the credits. I'm serious.
The children's science fantasy war adventure says hope too much? I never would have guessed. Here's the thing, CinemaSins. Star Wars kind of has to say the word hope a lot. The villains fight complacency with fascism, and the heroes fight fascism with hope, because that's literally how it fucking works in a Star Wars movie. On an unrelated note, why does CinemaSins censor the swear words they use in their videos when, in this same video, they make references to both masturbation and Pornhub? So, mentioning you jack off to women in your spare time is perfectly reasonable, but swearing is not. Those sins highlight CinemaSins' misogyny, as it indicates how CinemaSins only view women as objects to jack off to and not human beings.
Awesome. Even remove a sin worthy. But who the was Snoke? We built this guy up throughout the first movie, and now we're killing him near the end of the second one without an ounce of explanation as to where he came from.
You mean to tell me the two-dimensional villain ended up getting killed in the second film so that the villain with more weight and nuance could take over? No! Keep in mind, in the original trilogy, we knew nothing about the Emperor. In Return of the Jedi, Palpatine was just the ruler of the Galactic Empire and Darth Vader's master. But outside that, we knew nothing about him before Vader killed him. The Emperor was just as two-dimensional in Return of the Jedi as Snoke was in this movie.
Rose, why the f*** did she do this? He's about to sacrifice himself to save hundreds of people, and she does this. If she was going to do something that was going to potentially end her own life, why didn't she just crash headfirst into the cannon, instead of preventing Finn from doing it? Now you f***ed everybody, Rose. I hope you're happy.
Finn wasn't about to do jack shit. His speeder was being melted by the heat of the cannon. This meant that whether Rose crashed into Finn or not, the Resistance's base was going to be penetrated by the First Order regardless.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
Also, letting someone smash into a cannon that would have saved hundreds of lives would have worked too. But sure, what an empowering message of stupidity.
Again, because the cannon caused Finn's speeder to melt before he reached it, he would have died before he made his sacrifice mean something.
He's stalling so we can escape.
It sure would have been nice for Luke to tell them that before he went out to confront Kylo. Maybe even tell them where some exits are. Or hell, maybe even help create an exit, since apparently Jedi are like God now. But I guess having Poe figure it out for himself and figuring Rey would come to save the day was good enough.
There was an explanation for how Poe figured out how to escape. He followed the Ice Wolves. You know, the same Ice Wolves you complained about earlier in the same video. I love how when the movie gives an explanation to make the plot easier for CinemaSins to understand, CinemaSins find a way to complain about that too. Fucking hell. To close this video out, I think Luke Skywalker himself summarizes my problem with this CinemaSins video of The Last Jedi.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Everything you've come to expect from CinemaSins at their very worst is present in this video. Unfunny jokes, a misunderstanding of the movie's theme and plot, not paying attention resulting in CinemaSins missing important plot details, cutting out character motivation to make unfunny jokes, and repetition of the same unfunny joke ad nauseum. Really, the only reason why this clickbait bullshit exists is to cash in on the success of the Star Wars franchise, with CinemaSins video coming out a few days prior to the release of the most recent film in the Star Wars franchise.